It was supposed to be a homecoming. One of those late-night television moments that warms your heart, a triumphant return after months of silence, whispers, and worry. The crowd had filled every seat with anticipation, buzzing like static with hope and admiration. Because tonight, Jaime Foxx was back. After months of uncertainty following a near-fatal health scare that sent shockwaves through fans and friends alike, Jaime was ready to re-enter the public eye, ready to laugh, ready to charm, ready to remind everyone why he's more than just a Hollywood star, he's a survivor. The cameras zoomed in on the stage at The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. The set was familiar, warm, inviting, but something was different. The mood shifted the moment Stephen stepped out to introduce his guest. No glowing monologue, no nostalgic tribute, just a dry, almost procedural announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, Jaime Foxx. Even the way he said it felt off. Polite, sure, but hollow. As if he were reading a name off a list, not welcoming a man who had just stared death in the face. Still, Jaime emerged from backstage with that unmistakable Foxx energy smiling. Waving, absorbing the standing ovation like sunlight, he looked strong, rested, alive. The crowd was electric, feeding off the relief and joy of seeing him again. But that warmth never quite made it to the host's side of the desk. "Jamie, great to have you back," Stephen offered, his words dipped in a tone. Too smooth, too rehearsed. Jaime, a seasoned entertainer, caught it instantly. "Great to be back, Stephen. Thanks for having me, man." "The audience is incredible tonight," Jaime replied with practiced charm. He smiled wide, but inside, a flag went up. Then, like a trap, door swinging open, Stephen made his first move. "Yes, well, they're excited to see you alive and well." There were certainly questions about that for a while, weren't there? The words were like ice water, delivered with a smile, but cutting deeper than any punchline. The crowd laughed nervously. Some thought it was a jolt, but others felt the change. A cold front was moving in. Jaime kept his face steady. That's what years in the business had taught him. But this wasn't just some roast. This was different. This wasn't a jab. It was a dig. "Yeah, you know, health scares happen," he said slowly. "I'm grateful to be here. Grateful for my family, my team, everyone who supported me through that time." But Stephen wasn't done. "Supported you through what exactly? Because you've been pretty vague about the whole thing. Some people are saying you're being deliberately mysterious for publicity reasons." The words dropped like bricks, and for the first time, the tension became impossible to ignore. The crowd shifted. You could see it in the way people started looking at each other, their claps falling quiet. Jaime sat up a little straighter. He wasn't just answering questions now. He was defending his right to exist. "Stephen, I've shared what I'm comfortable sharing. My health, my family's privacy, that's important to me. I think people understand that." But Colbert leaned in closer, colder. "Do they, though? Because social media's been brutal. Some are saying you faked the whole thing, that it was a publicity stunt for your upcoming Netflix special. What do you say to those people?" Visible shift passed through Jaime's face. It was subtle but there, his jaw clenched, his posture rigid. His words came slower now, heavier. "I'd say those people don't know what they're talking about. I'd say they weren't there when my daughter thought she might lose her father. I'd say they can believe whatever they want, but I know my truth. That should have been enough. But it wasn't, because tonight wasn't about questions. It was about accusations." Stephen pressed again. "But surely you can understand their skepticism. You disappeared, no explanation, and now suddenly you're back with a Netflix special, a movie. The timing's convenient." That word, convenient, Jaime blinked, almost in disbelief. "You think almost dying is convenient?" he said, voice rising. "You think putting my family through hell is convenient? What are you trying to say here, Stephen?" And just like that, the pleasantries were over. "I'm not trying to say anything," Colbert said, smiling thinly. "I'm asking questions. Isn't that what journalism is about?" "This isn't journalism," Jaime shot back, his tone sharp now. "This is a late-night talk show. People come here to laugh, to escape what you're doing right now. This isn't entertainment. It's an ambush." The crowd was silent, the kind of silence you can feel pressing against your chest. Still, Colbert didn't stop. "This isn't an ambush, Jaime. These are legitimate questions. Your fans deserve transparency. They were worried about you. They deserve to know the truth." That word again, truth. Jaime's composure began to crack. His voice wasn't angry, it was raw. The truth is, I almost lost everything. The truth is, I spent weeks not knowing if I'd ever act again, sing again, live again. The truth is, while I was fighting for my life, people like you were trading rumors for ratings. Colbert's expression changed barely but enough. To see he'd been hit, still, he refused to back down. People like me, what's that supposed to mean? It means people who use someone else's lowest moment as a way to feel powerful. People who call it journalism when it's really just cruelty. The words hung in the air like smoke. Colbert sat still, his jaw tight. Then came the turn, the accusation that would change everything. Maybe I should be asking you what you need to be held accountable for, Stephen said. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like someone who disappeared when things got tough left his projects hanging, left his co-stars scrambling, and now wants to waltz back in like nothing happened. Gasps from the front row. Audible, visceral. Jaime's hands gripped the sides of his chair. His voice was a growl now. I was in the hospital, Stephen. I was dying. You have any idea what that feels like? You think I walked away because things got tough? I was fighting for my life. And what about the people who relied on you? Stephen snapped back. The studios, the crews, the other actors, my team handled it. Legal handled it. Insurance handled it. Everyone who needed to know knew. But apparently, you needed to know every detail so you could turn it into a damn monologue. The interview had turned into something else entirely now. Not TV, not performance, something real, something dangerous. Sit down, Jaime, Stephen said sharply. Jaime stood. Up, you want drama? Let me show you drama, he said, voice quivering but strong. Drama is waking up with tubes in your throat. Drama is your child crying at your bedside. Drama is having to learn how to talk again. Stephen's cheeks were red now. And yet here you are, perfectly fine, doing press. Funny how fast you healed once there was money to be made. The room froze. Even the band fell silent. Jaime's head turned slowly. You know what, Stephen, he said, walking toward the edge of the stage, voice steady. I came here thinking we were friends, that this would be a celebration, that we'd make people laugh, but this is personal. Personal, Colbert shot back, finally standing. Oh, it's personal. And you know why? Because this isn't about transparency. It's about a joke I made 3 years ago during an award speech you couldn't let go. The crowd gasped again. What? What are you talking about? Colbert stammered. You remember, Jaime said, because you brought it up at the after-party. You brought it up every chance you got. You've been nursing that wound for 3 years, waiting for a chance to take me down. And in that moment, the entire audience saw it. This wasn't a comeback. This was a setup. And the man who was supposed to host a celebration had turned it into a grudge match. A pin could have dropped, and the entire studio would have heard it. This wasn't just a late-night interview anymore. This was a reckoning. A 3-year-old wound cracked wide open in front of a live audience and a world now watching through. Screens that could replay every second, frame by frame. Stephen Colbert stood rigid behind his desk, his face twitching as he tried to hold his television smile in place. But it was slipping. Fast, the man in front of him wasn't just a guest. Anymore, he was a mirror, and Stephen. He didn't like what he saw. You're being paranoid, Jamie, Colbert said, attempting to brush it all off with a shrug. Not everything is about you. But Jaime Foxx didn't flinch. His eyes didn't blink. His voice, though calm, was now coated in a steel that even years of Hollywood couldn't polish away. Your own writers told my publicist about the meeting, Jaime said quietly, but the quiet made it deafening. About how you said, you wanted to take Jamie down? A peg. Colbert's mouth twitched again. I don't know what you think you heard. I know what I heard, Jaime said, because they recorded it. A ripple ran through the audience. Phones were coming out now, rules be damned. Nobody wanted to miss this moment, even behind a screen. They were so uncomfortable with what you were planning. They documented it, Jaime continued, his voice unwavering. You said your exact words. I want to make him squirm like the arrogant piece of garbage he is. Stephen's face drained of color. His lips parted like he wanted to argue, but no words came. The damage was already done. He tried to find footing, tried to retreat back to the safe territory of vague justification. That's completely out of context. That's part of the creative process. Sometimes we brainstorm bold material. Creative process, Jaime scoffed. You call plotting someone's public humiliation a creative process. He took a step closer. You call using your show as a weapon against people who've offended you creative. You're twisting this, Stephen said quickly. That's not what happened then. Tell them what did happen, Stephen, Jaime interrupted. Tell them why, instead of celebrating someone's recovery, you turned this night into a trap. The cameras were scrambling now, switching angles like they were filming a courtroom drama. But this wasn't scripted. There were no cue cards for this kind of truth. Stephen looked around the room, then down at his desk, then up again. But every route of escape had vanished. Jaime stepped back, not retreating, but resetting. I'll tell them what happened, he said, voice full but even. 3 years ago at the Emmys, I made a joke. One line, a throwaway joke during an acceptance speech. Everyone laughed. He paused, then looked directly at Stephen. Everyone but you. You've been holding onto that moment ever since. Taking shots in your monologues, sliding digs into your writers' rooms, talking about me behind closed doors. He shook his head slowly, the disbelief still fresh. And tonight, you thought you had your moment. Thought you could get your revenge with the cameras rolling. Well, congratulations, you got your revenge. But you lost something bigger. Colbert finally broke his silence. That's ridiculous, he said. But even he didn't sound convinced. You? Remember, Jaime repeated, because your ego couldn't forget. The crowd was dead still, like they didn't dare breathe. You had your writers dig through my past, through my health, through everything, just to find a weak point you could exploit on camera. You had an entire production meeting about how to back me into a corner. And for what? He turned, gesturing to the audience. For them, faces filled with confusion, discomfort, regret. No, this wasn't for them. This was for you. Stephen was visibly shaking now. His hands tapped against his mug in small, frantic motions. I think you're blowing this out of proportion, he began, but Jaime cut him off with a slow, deliberate breath. I was supposed to die, Stephen. His voice dropped, soft but commanding. I had a stroke. Not some tabloid drama, not a PR stunt. A stroke. I couldn't talk. I couldn't walk. My daughter was told she might have to plan my funeral. A woman in the front row clasped her hands over her mouth, and while I was learning to tie my shoes, again, you were writing punchlines. Stephen lowered his eyes. I wasn't trying to hurt you, he mumbled. Yes, you were, Jaime replied, no hesitation. That was the entire point. Jaime walked toward the camera now, stepping past the desk, breaking the format entirely. He turned and faced the studio audience and every viewer at home. This show isn't about journalism, he said, and it isn't about truth, it's about image. And tonight, that image cracked. He looked back at Colbert. You could have chosen grace. You could have chosen celebration. You could have used your platform to remind people that healing is possible. He took another step, but instead, you wanted to settle a score. Colbert stood. I think we need to take a commercial break. Jaime didn't move. We're not going to a break. You wanted this live. Then let's finish it live. Colbert froze, glancing nervously off camera. The producers were standing now. The band was motionless. Nobody was sure if this was a catastrophe or a ratings goldmine. It was supposed to be a celebration, Jaime said again, and you turned it into a courtroom. And now you're trying to plead the fifth. Colbert clenched his fists on the desk. I don't need to apologize for asking questions. No, Jaime said, but you do need to apologize for doing it with cruelty. He looked around the studio, at the cameras, at the blinking red lights that meant the whole world was still watching. You wanted to talk about accountability, Jaime asked, turning back to Colbert. Then let's talk about it. You don't hold someone accountable for getting sick. You don't punish someone for having a medical emergency. You don't try to humiliate someone for surviving, because that's not accountability, that's cruelty. And the silence afterward, it wasn't awkward, it was righteous. You could almost hear it, the invisible rip between show business and real life. One moment, there were two men in a brightly lit studio surrounded by laughter and lights. The next, they were two wounded forces locked in a battle that was never supposed to reach the stage. But now, the stage was all they had, and the audience, they weren't just watching, they were witnesses. Jaime. Foxx had just called out Stephen Colbert, not just for a single bad interview, not just for one cutting question, but for something deeper, something more corrosive. For turning a platform of laughter into a weapon of bitterness. Stephen stood behind his desk, fingers clenched around a stack of cue cards he would no longer read from. They were worthless now. Everything scripted had collapsed under the weight of truth. "You think this is easy for me," Colbert finally said, his voice cracking beneath its own bravado. "You think I like confrontation? This isn't who I am." Jaime turned slowly. "No, it's exactly who you are. You just hide it behind punchlines and a desk." The crowd's stillness turned electric again. Not cheering, not clapping, just locked in. "I came here thinking I was sitting across from a friend," Jaime said, "but what I found was a man so afraid of being overshadowed, he'd rather destroy a guest than share the spotlight." Colbert's shoulders stiffened. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Jaime replied. "You couldn't handle me being the story. You couldn't handle the idea of the world loving someone you were jealous of." Colbert's mouth opened, but nothing came out. "You called this accountability," Jaime said, stepping closer again. "But all you've done tonight is expose your own insecurity." A camera shifted focus behind Jaime, catching Stephen's reflection in the polished surface of his desk. Man looking at the version of himself he always denied existed. The writers in the wings stood frozen. Some couldn't look away. Others couldn't look at all. The tension wasn't just thick, it was historical. "You sat in a room with your producers and talked about how to make me squirm," Jaime continued. "And now that the lights are on, you don't like what that looks like." Colbert's voice, when it came, was a whisper, struggling to stand tall. "I didn't think it would go like this, and I didn't think I'd wake up in a hospital." "Unable to remember my own name," Jaime said. "But we don't always get to choose our moments." Jaime turned to the audience again, taking a deep breath, letting the silence soak before speaking. "You know what I realized while I was recovering?" he asked them gently. "That success means nothing if you forget your humanity." The crowd's eyes locked on him, every single one of them. "You can have all the Emmys, all the viral clips, all the sold-out shows, but if you lose your integrity, you've already lost." He turned back to Stephen.com, composed, but fueled by something so rare in Hollywood, it stopped people in their tracks. Conviction. "I survived something that should have ended me," he said, "and I came back with one goal, to celebrate that survival. But you," he gestured at the desk, "the lights, the cameras, you turned this into a hit piece, a live autopsy for your own resentment." Colbert sat, stunned, the lines in his face deeper than usual. Whatever mask he wore each night, it was off now. "You think this was easy for me, Jamie?" he finally said, voice shaky. "You have no idea the pressure I'm under every night, the expectations, the scrutiny, the competition. I can't afford to be boring. I can't afford to be forgettable." "Then maybe," Jaime said, voice low and calm, "you shouldn't be hosting a show at all." The words didn't land like a jab. They landed like a diagnosis. Honest, clinical, unshakable. The audience gasped against him in disbelief. Others in agreement. But no one dared laugh. This wasn't comedy anymore. This was raw nerve. Broadcasted live. Colbert stood up slowly. "You think I did this out of jealousy?" "I know you did," Jaime said. "Because if this had been anyone else, anyone, you didn't feel threatened by you would have had balloons and champagne waiting backstage. There was no comeback, no smirk, just silence. Real, cold, echoing silence." "I came here tonight," Jaime said, walking toward the center of the stage now. "Not just for publicity. I came because I believed in something bigger than myself." He turned to face the studio audience again. "Believed that maybe, after everything I went through, I could offer people hope. That I could show them it's possible to come back from the edge and still laugh again, still create again, still live again." He paused. "But instead of celebrating that, your host tried to break me, tried to turn my survival into a scandal." Colbert tried to find his voice again. "I just... I wanted to ask questions that matter," Jaime interrupted, not with anger, but with clarity. "You want to matter, Stephen," he said. "That's what this has always been about. You think provoking pain equals relevance. But here's what you missed." He stepped even closer. "You don't matter because of the questions you ask. You matter because of how you treat the people who answer them, and in that moment, he owned the room. The audience began to shift again. Not with fear, not with awkwardness, but with something that had been missing since Jaime walked on stage. Respect, applause, began to bubble up, not raucous or dramatic, but warm, honest. From the back rows first, then the middle, then the front. A wave of empathy rising like the tide. Jaime looked around, then locked eyes with Stephen. "This was your show," he said. "But this moment, this is mine." Colbert's lips moved, but no sound came out. Because what could he say? That he was sorry, that he didn't mean it, that it was all a joke. There were no punchlines left, only silence and shame. Jaime stepped to the edge of the stage. The band leader, who had sat silent for nearly 10 minutes, stood and gave Jaime a respectful nod. He whispered something, just a few words, but Jaime smiled. Finally, he turned back one last time. "You used your platform to try to humiliate me," he said, "but all you did was reveal yourself." And with that, he stepped off stage, not as a guest, but as a man who took his dignity back live. The cameras caught Stephen, still standing behind his desk, still blinking under the lights he once commanded. A man stripped of his polish. A man wondering what the world would say when the commercial ended, and the world they were watching. Every single second. The band was silent. The lights didn't dim. The cameras didn't cut. The credits didn't roll. And yet, something had ended. Jamie Foxx had walked off the stage with his dignity intact, the roar of a standing ovation echoing behind him. But the silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was radioactive. Stephen Colbert sat alone at his desk. For once, the stage around him didn't feel like a kingdom. It felt like a witness stand. And the jury was everyone, his audience, his team, and a million viewers already refreshing their feeds, replaying the moment, analyzing every glance and every word. This wasn't just a PR nightmare. It was a legacy event. Stephen stared straight ahead. No cue cards, no teleprompter. Just raw, unfiltered humiliation settling around him like a fog. In the control room, producers scrambled. Phone lines lit up like Christmas trees. The network execs were calling. Twitter had already exploded. TikTok. Clips had been uploaded and dissected before the show even cut to commercial. It was out there now, forever, and no edit, no voiceover, no carefully written apology would undo it. Meanwhile, just backstage, Jamie stood still. His chest rose and fell as the adrenaline drained from his system. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't even sad. He was exhausted. A crew member approached cautiously, like someone approaching a lion who had just finished roaring. "You all right?" they asked, voice soft. Jamie nodded. "I'm good," he said. And for the first time in a long time, he meant it. Because tonight wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. For months, Jamie had been painted as a mystery. Headlines whispered, fans speculated, critics circled like vultures. But tonight, he wasn't a question mark anymore. He was an exclamation dot, and across the country, people were watching. Fans, survivors, people who had been through their own private storms. People who knew what it meant to be torn down and still stand up. He'd spoken for them. To Dot back in the studio, the audience hadn't moved. Some still stood, clapping softly. Others sat frozen, unsure of how to react to what they'd just seen. A few wiped away tears, not from sorrow, but from something deeper. Recognition. They hadn't just watched a celebrity confrontation. They'd watched two worldviews collide, two definitions of power clash in real time, and Jamie. He'd won not because he shouted louder, not because he humiliated Stephen back, but because he told the truth, and told it beautifully. Up in the rafters, a lighting tech leaned forward and whispered to his colleague. "That was history," he said. "We just filmed history." The next morning, headlines screamed across every platform. Jamie Foxx walks off Stephen Colbert's show in viral confrontation. Fox versus Colbert, the interview that shook Hollywood. Is this the end of late night as we know it? Clips of the moment spread like wildfire. A still frame of Jamie standing tall under the hot lights. Another of Stephen, seated, stunned. His jaw clenched just slightly. The internet didn't just react it. Dissected essays were written. Tweets were weaponized. Think pieces bloomed like mushrooms in a thunderstorm. Some supported Stephen, most did not. And Jamie, he didn't log in, he didn't tweet, he didn't post a notes app, apology, or a cryptic Instagram story. He let the moment speak, because it already had that night in a quiet hotel room with the TV off and the curtains drawn. Jamie sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. It had buzzed nonstop for 14 hours. Messages poured in from old friends, former co-stars, journalists, even strangers. You said what needed to be said. Thank you for standing up for yourself, for all of us. That was bravery. His daughter called just past midnight. You okay, Dad? She asked, her voice small but proud. Yeah, Jamie said softly. I'm okay. He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. There was a long pause on the line. I was proud of you before, she said, but now? I don't even have words. Jamie closed his eyes, holding the phone tighter. You're the only audience I needed, he whispered. Across town in a colder room with brighter lights, Stephen sat alone. No writers, no band, no audience, don't one band. Just him and the playback monitors. Watching it all over again, he paused it on the moment. Jamie said, You don't matter because of the questions you ask. You matter because of how you treat the people who answer them. That line hit like a mirror to the soul Stephen had built. A career on wit, on critique, on holding a sharp lens to power. But somewhere along the way, maybe he'd turned that lens on the wrong people. The vulnerable, the hurting, the ones who needed grace more than interrogation. He reached for a pen, then paused. What was there to write? A week later, Jamie sat down not on a soundstage, not under spotlights, but in front of his own camera, a quiet room. A wooden desk, a single mic, no audience, just the truth. He looked into the lens, calm and present. Hey everybody, he began, smiling gently. I just want to talk. No fanfare, no production, just Jamie. I've gotten thousands of messages in the last few days, a lot of love, a lot of outrage, a lot of people asking, what really happened on that stage? He leaned forward, and I think the answer is simple. Life happened. He let the silence breathe. Sometimes you go through something and you think you've left it behind, but it catches up, sometimes with applause, sometimes with confrontation. His voice was smooth, measured. I went through something I thought I'd never survive, but I did, and I came back, changed, a little more unwilling to tolerate anything that doesn't serve truth. He smiled again. I don't hate Stephen. I really don't. I think he's a man under pressure, in a machine that doesn't reward kindness the way it should. He looked down, then up again. But I also believe in calling things what they are, and what happened on that stage. That wasn't journalism. That wasn't accountability. He nodded slowly. That was pain, dressed in a suit. Across the world, millions watched the video, shared it, quoted it. Pain dressed in a suit. Success means nothing if you forget your humanity. These weren't just lines now. They were etched in the digital archive of culture lines that would be remembered long after the scandal faded. And Stephen, he released a statement, short, contrite, careful. He said he regretted the tone, that he was reflecting on how to be better, that he hoped Jamie would accept his apology. Jamie didn't reply. He didn't need to, because in the court of public opinion, the verdict was clear. This wasn't a man throwing a tantrum, it was a man reclaiming his narrative. Epilogue months passed. Stephen returned to his desk. Smiles were more cautious now. Interviews less piercing. And Jamie took the stage again. This time not for a talk show, but for a Netflix special. Alive, the name said it all. In it, he spoke with humor, warmth, pain, and fire. He told stories, some funny, some haunting. He made people laugh, cry, think. And when the camera panned out in the final shot, the crowd on their feet, tears and joy on their faces. One thing was crystal clear. Jamie Foxx didn't just survive, he transformed, and in doing so, he taught Hollywood all of us that being alive isn't about being perfect, it's about telling your truth, even when the lights are the brightest and the stage is rigged against you.